So thank you for taking time out of your day to talk to me. First, I'm just going to explain my assignment. So the first part that I have to do is I have to do this interview, and we just have to talk about what you think is effective communication. And then the second part is I'm going to reflect on what you say and go back and write about it. So just to get us started, what would you say is your role in your profession, and how do you think effective communication links in with that?
Well, basically I'm an estimator / project manager. So if I don't communicate correctly to the client and my staff, the job doesn't happen the way it's supposed to happen, basically. So the customer doesn't get what they want, and we don't get paid at the end of the day. So communication's everything in our field.
Yeah. So if you can, do you think that you'd be able to give me an example of when you've used very, very good communication, and then maybe an example where you haven't?
All right, well, very recently we had to stand a very large sign in Catherine in the Northern Territory. So basically the sign was going in this place of an old sign. So what we used, we used the existing footing of the old sign, and we had to stand the new sign on that existing footing to save dollars for the customer. First part of the process was to send a staff member to site in the Northern Territory. So one, we had to get them up there. I had to explain exactly what I needed in the way of dimensions and power, lighting, availability of access equipment, everything you could imagine to stand this sign, basically in the middle of nowhere. So step one, the staff member went there. He came back with all the information I needed. I then proceeded to do a drawing to make an adapter beam to fit the new sign onto the old footing. I then had to draw it all up, send it to a fabricator. He then made the adapter beam from the drawing and the dimensions that my installer gave to me, which then we then proceeded to do the install of the sign. The sign was then driven from Brisbane to Catherine in the Northern Territory. That took 3.5 days. During this, we had to communicate a travel management plan for the staff member to make sure he wasn't overdriving his limits and all that. He had to stand the sign and then come back to Brisbane. So we had to communicate the whole process from the time we left Brisbane to the point of just putting the sign on the truck, how he tied it down to make it travel 3,500 kilometres, get the sign stood with access equipment, with electricians, with available staff in the small town, and back to Brisbane safely. The sign went up without a hitch. There was no problem. So obviously what I asked the original guy to inspect and do the survey on, he understood correctly. The adapter beam was built, the sign was stood, the customer's happy, all in the time frame. The staff member got back to Brisbane safely, and we got paid for the job.
Okay, so what you're saying is that pretty much effective communication is vital for a job to go well.
Correct. Without effective communication, the job doesn't go correct. The potential is for staff to get hurt, which is the worst case scenario, or the job just doesn't go right and we don't get paid for it.
And then, do you think that you could give me an example of when maybe not very good communication has happened?
A very similar situation. We needed a survey done on a site. I sent a staff member which I basically assumed knew what I wanted. I didn't go through every step and everything that I needed to get from him. He arrived back the next day. I started to collate the information and found out there's an awful lot of information missing. So he obviously didn't understand what I was trying to ask, or I didn't communicate it properly, which I think was the process. So what happened then was I had to send him back to site. It cost us money, it cost time, and a bit of embarrassment for myself because I couldn't communicate to the client that I had everything ready for it in time.
So we live in a very technological world. So I think communication can be face-to-face, or it could be like an email or a text. Do you think that there's a difference between the effectiveness of face-to-face communication compared to just sending an email?
Yes. I don't believe that a staff member can get all the information from an email. It's very hard to write down 100% of what you want. But in saying that, every single thing we ask for also gets written down as a checklist.
Mm-hmm.
So not only is it verbally spoken to the staff, it's also a electronic format that they can check off while they're there on site, because even the people with the best memory can forget something.
Mm-hmm.
So we always have two forms of communication with everything we do.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for coming and talking to me today. I really appreciate it. And hopefully from what you've said about effective communication, I can take into the profession that I want to do. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.